Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good day to you. That's depending where you are in the world. It is our nighttime devotion. The devotional is called Conflict and Courage. The title today, Divine Vengeance. Romans 12, verse 19. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord. Although Nabal had refused the needy company of David and his men, yet that very night he made an extravagant feast for himself and his riotous friends, and indulged in eating and drinking till he sank in a drunken stupor. Nabal thought nothing of spending an extravagant amount of his wealth to indulge and glorify himself. But it seemed too painful a sacrifice for him to bestow compensation which he never would have missed. Upon those who had been like a wall to his flocks and herds. Nabal was like the rich man in the parable. He had only one thought, to use God's merciful gifts to gratify his selfish animal appetites. He had no thought of gratitude to the giver. He was not rich toward God, for eternal treasure had no attraction for him. Present luxury, present gain, was the only one absorbing thought of his life. This was his God. Nabal was a coward at heart, and when he realized how near his folly had brought him to a sudden death, he seemed smitten with paralysis, fearful that David would still pursue his purpose of revenge. He was filled with horror, sank down in a condition of helpless insensibility. After 10 days, he died. The life that God had given him had been only a curse to the world. In the midst of his rejoicing and making merry, God had said to him, as he said to the rich man of the parable, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. That's Luke 12, verse 20. When David heard the tidings of the death of Nabal, he gave thanks that God had taken vengeance into his own hands. He had been restrained from evil, and the Lord had returned the wickedness of the wicked upon their own head. In this dealing of God with Nabal and David, men may be encouraged to put their cases into the hands of God. For in his own good time, he will set matters right. Divine vengeance. Now we know exactly why it's called divine vengeance. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So Nabal, if you'd listened previously, the king married to Abigail, and it was because David and his men had asked for food to feed them. Nabal refused. But Abigail, knowing who David was, she made a provision for David. She went to David and the men and she gave them the provision, and she basically apologized on behalf of Nabal, her husband, which David accepted, and whereby David wanted to seek his own revenge. Abigail gave him good advice. He didn't. He waited. And as we read today, God revenged or avenged him. But that wasn't just for David, that was for God. He did it for himself as well, because he had blessed Nabal with a lot of riches and a kingdom, etc., etc., etc. And Nabal was all about himself, all about aggrandizing himself. And as it says, having spent an extravagant amount of wealth on the party he was having, and to indulge and glorify himself. And he didn't give a morsel to David and his men. Vengeance is mine, divine vengeance. This is what God, our Father, is saying. Don't take vengeance into your own hands. That will lead you to sin. Give it to God and move on in your life humbly and peacefully.